Righteousness and justice are standards. If this, then that. Okay? Here are certain, circumstances of the case. This is what's righteous. This is what's not righteous. Those are standards. Justice is the execution of righteousness. And Pastor spent, I want to say something on the order of 20 years trying to work out all this stuff. And he finally came to the conclusion in the year 2000 that love is God's head attribute. And he's right about that, because justice and righteousness cannot, of themselves, fulfill anything. They can only say right, wrong, and then justice can execute what righteousness is, but it never pays for the wrong. Righteousness says what's right and wrong. Justice says, a sentence or, some other kind of reward, but it can't pay for what's wrong. Only love can do that. And love by nature substitutes and forgoes, sacrifices itself on behalf of the object. In this case, the object is righteousness and justice. And that's, you see a lot of verses in the Bible on this. My pastor spent a lot of time going through them to show, okay, the love verses, the justice verses, and the righteousness verses. Like, for example, Psalm 89, 14 and 15. Okay, God decides that righteousness and truth and justice, and Psalm 138, too, is another good one, are to be above his own name. That's a decision. All right? Okay? Love and truth go before God. That's another statement like Psalm 138, too. Okay? That's in Psalm 89. That's a decision by God. So righteousness and justice exist because he decides that they exist. Not, to say God is righteous is his will to be righteous. It's his will to be just. They're not attributes that just happen to exist that sort of constrain God to be that way. That's where the Calvinists got it backwards. Even though they call God sovereign, they just take away his sovereignty when they say that God is constrained. They just ripped it out. They made God into a slave of his attributes. That's not true. It's the other way around. His attributes are the slave of his will, just like yours are, just like mine is. Because God wills that we be free, and he ensures that, and that includes our freedom to be bad, with all the consequent effects that go with it. And it's righteous to do that, because it's righteous that truth be free. It wouldn't be truth if it weren't free. It wouldn't be truth if it was shaved. And that's where Satan's big argument is, and why we got the angelic conflict. Satan, was learning about God just like all the other angels, and he came to realize this shocking thing I'm telling you. And it pissed him off. It's like, well, what's the point of being righteous if all you're going to do is kill yourself for it? For no gain. There's no gain. God just kills himself, as it were, for righteousness and justice, just like Psalm 89 says. Just because he loves it so much. Okay? Just because he loves. So love fulfills righteousness and justice, but righteousness and justice have two sides. They have a side where the standard is met, and they have a side where the standard is never met. Because the standard can't be met by anything finite, ever. Even if perfect, it's still short. Romans 3:23 falls short of the glory of God. And the glory of God is to kill himself for righteousness and justice, and that's how he chooses to live. Period. And this is what pisses Satan off, and what pisses people off too, is that God doesn't want there to be a limit on bad. And it's a natural limit on bad because it's basically, winding itself down. It ends up dying. But God didn't impose that limit. What God does instead is ensures its existence. And then it kills itself. God doesn't kill it. It kills itself. But God caused Christ to pay for all of it so it could live. So we could live and be whatever, free to be bad or good. So that's the shocking nature of God, is that his attributes are what he wills them to be, and he can change it at any time, and we'd never know the difference. and all this business about love and righteousness and justice are willed attributes. They're not imposed attributes on God. He wills them constantly and enjoys it and doesn't want to be another way. Okay? It's one big stasis, one big now. If there was ever a logical point in time when God would will not to be righteous, of course, we would experience that, assuming that we would exist at all. We would experience that at some future point. But it's never going to happen because there's nothing that can tempt God. That's one of the things that the Bible is always saying, that the translators always screw up. They say God cannot be tempted. No, it's not God cannot be. It's the thing. There's no thing. There's no object that can exist that can tempt him. The inability is in the object, not in God. But they reverse that in translation, like in James and I want to say Hebrews 6. They make it sound like God cannot be something. It's the other way around. The object cannot do to God something that will change his love for righteousness and justice. Ever. Right? So that is the most shocking thing to know about God. And a lot of people, when I've talked to them about this, because I've been doing this for years, when I've talked to them about this in the past, they're like, oh, but then there's no guarantee. Why do you want one? You want a guarantee outside of God? You want God to be a slave, and then that thing that enslaves God is your guarantee? Then it isn't God you want. Then you're just like Satan, because that's what Satan wants. Satan wants something to constrain God. So that's why Satan sells to the theologians the idea of a constrained God. That's Satan's idea, not the reality. That's why the translations reverse and make God cannot be a liar. No, God can be a liar. Nothing can make him lie, is what that says in the real, the real Greek. I've gone through that in a Can God Sin video. So the shocking thing about God is that he wills to love. And he wills to love irrespective of an object, therefore bad can exist, and it's still loved. It's treated as if it's loved because it's allowed to exist. It's allowed to be what it is. He actually ensures its own effects because he won't shave truth, and he wants truth to be free. So truth is freely bad and freely good by God's own decree. And that's the shocking thing of God's personality. Now, do you want to be an atheist yet? Have I convinced you you ought to become one? Gee, why am I not an atheist? Why do I love God instead? Look at him. He's either the most gorgeous person in the universe, or I wish I were never born. There's no middle ground. God's personality is all. And he ensures all. Because he loves truth and he wants it to be free. And that is what righteousness is. And that is what justice is. And that is our big problem with him. Okay? And it's all settled on the cross. All that free bad coming in, and Christ counter-thinking. Never changing the thing that's bad. Just counter-thinking. And all that good counter-thinking wouldn't have been there if the bad didn't create the juridical occasion. That's the glory of God. And that's the hardest thing about him to want to know, accept, and live with.